Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode.
Today we're talking about being too young to feel this old, and this episode is released 3 days before I turn 40, which feels weird.
How are you feeling about that?
Honestly, a bit like, how did I get here? Like, surely I'm still 25 and just really tired.
I think that's the thing though, whether you're turning 25, 30 or 40, there's this moment where you look around and think, I thought I'd be more sorted by now.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of our listeners, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, or any age, there's this extra layer of everyone else seems to be living while you're just trying to survive your own brain.
Right. Your mates are getting engaged, buying houses, posting holiday photos, and you're like, I managed to set a boundary with my mum today without crying.
Which is actually massive, but doesn't make a great Instagram story.
Exactly. So today we're talking about why healing takes up the space that living is supposed to fill, why you're not actually behind, and how to start living even when you're still figuring yourself out.
Because waiting until you're fixed means you'll be waiting forever.
Let's get into it.
So I know where I'm at with, and I think turning 40 is a fairly normal point to be like, oh, what am I doing with my life? Although I definitely had this when I was turning 30 as well. I'm wondering do you feel the age that you are?
No.
If you didn't know how old you were, how old would you think you were?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Yeah, I feel like I need to be able to step outside of myself. To be fair, I don't think it's that much different, but I'd maybe say, so I'm 37 now, and I'd probably say 32, maybe 31, 32, just very early 30s.
Yeah.
Definitely don't feel like I'm in my 20s.
Mm.
I guess I do in some ways. But I definitely say I'd sit at the threshold of 30. I definitely don't feel, as I'm 37, it feels like a downhill slope to 40. I feel bad saying this when you're literally at 40, but ultimately, got to be honest, that's how it feels for me. Just downhill now. I may as well basically be 40 is how it feels.
Yeah. And my internal response is that I am not at 40. I am at the point that we're recording this. I'm still nearly a month away.
9 and 11 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. The figure I had in mind for myself was 32 as well. But I definitely have points where I feel younger than that. So sometimes when I'm working with clients that are in their 20s, I have to remind myself that I'm not their age.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes, I go to relate, and then it's remembering that, you're not the same age as them.
Yeah. I remember when I started working with my therapist, who is, I think 5-6 years older than me. And I remember feeling like, oh yeah, that's so much older than me. But now I've hit the ages that she is. I'm like, oh no, it's not that old, is it? But yeah, it just feels like such a big deal to be turning 40, and also that not feeling my age is such a consistent thing throughout my life.
Yeah.
That it just felt like something interesting to explore.
Yeah, I wonder how many other people have consistently not felt their age, whether there are people out there who feel that they are the age that they are. But it's such an interesting concept. How did you feel when you turned 30?
I can't really remember, but I was pregnant and had a lot of morning sickness. So the only thing I really remember about my 30th birthday was that I managed to eat a meal for the first time in weeks.
Oh.
But what came into my mind was when I first started therapy, so I think I was 23, I remember saying to that therapist that I just felt like I was 15. I felt like I was a 15-year-old that was trying to live an adult life, but without any of the adult capabilities.
Right.
And part of my story is that, so I suppose when I'm thinking about what are you supposed to be able to do or supposed to be doing at any particular age, is that I've always been a bit out of sync with everybody else or with most people because I became a mum when I was 18. So when other people are
Yeah.
doing like 18, doing uni the traditional way, staying in halls, girls' holidays, all those kinds of things, I didn't do any of that because I had a child and then another one when I was 20.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel the same because I'm approaching 40 and I've never been married and I don't have children. So, on
Right.
the opposite side, I feel out of step, even though I still didn't go to uni when everyone else did. I still went to uni later than other people. So, everything I've done has still felt out of step with everybody
Mm.
else as well.
I
Yeah.
feel like that really, just that interaction there, I feel like it really highlights the way that when you're in it, in your perspective, you feel like you're the one out of sync. But how many people are actually in sync? How many people actually live what is probably a very narrow perspective of the expected path? I wonder if more people used to follow the expected path. I'm just thinking about, so women in my position, so unmarried, 18, pregnant, probably would have been forced to give up their child and then they're shunted back on the path again. Obviously, still traumatized. And then there's, they're not really in sync with other people around them that haven't experienced that. And again, with childlessness, whether that's by choice or not by choice, that there's more conversation about that now than there was.
I feel like there are more conversations around these things.
Hmm.
And perhaps your perspective is very much going to be altered by the culture that you grow up in, what's
Yeah.
normal in that particular culture, but also in your area and friendship group. And it might feel different. But when I'm thinking about the expected milestones, if I was to browse through Facebook at the people that I went to school with, I feel like most of them, and yes, not all, but most of them seem to have followed that normal trajectory of
Mm.
uni, finding a partner, getting married, having children, and now
Mm.
have children who are late primary school, even into
Mm.
secondary school,
Mhm.
whereas I don't have children. And
Yeah.
even though not everybody follows that trajectory, my
Mhm.
experience from the area that I live in and the people that I grew up with
Yeah.
and went to school with is that people have still pretty much followed that normal trajectory.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to think about, so I'm not connected with so many people from my school days on social media anymore. But the ones that have, I just feel like there's a lot of variety. And I don't know if that's like, so lots of them have never married, lots of blended families rather than the, I think, expected 2.4 children. Yeah, more with no children than I kind of imagined when I was younger. I don't know, it just feels like it just feels like there's lots of variety. Definitely children later than what I imagined when I was younger. And
Hmm.
I think that just has been a shift for our generation, hasn't it? I think for our
Yeah.
parents, it was, they would have children in their mid 20s. And I think now it's much more common for people to have children in their late 30s
Hmm.
if they have them. Yeah.
Yeah, it is more common. I think the average age hovers around the 30-ish
Does it?
mark. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But people are having babies like later and
Mm-hmm.
later.
Yeah.
But I guess that also demonstrates the way in which you are measuring where you're at in life
Yeah.
is comparable to the people that are around you and the town or
Yeah.
city that you
Yeah.
live with, because my experience is everyone's pretty much followed this trajectory. Whereas when you think about people you went to school with, there does seem to be a real mix.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I thought they'd be fairly similar because I
Mm.
guess we both grew up in working class Midlands towns.
Yeah,
But yeah. Yeah. There does seem
yeah.
to be some difference there. Yeah.
I do think it would be different, definitely, depending on whereabouts. But even if we just focus on the UK, whereabouts in the UK you grew up. And I
Yeah.
think there will definitely be a difference between working in middle class. But equally, as somebody who's only ever really had a small, close subset of friends,
Hmm.
my best friends from uni, they both got pregnant at 1920.
Right.
So both of their children are secondary school preparing for GCSEs,
Mhm.
which is wild to me that in all of that time, like I haven't had a child and their children are literally getting ready to leave
Yes.
secondary school near enough. So you felt out of step because you had a child at 18, and yet my experience with my friends
Yeah.
is that's what they did. So I was out of step
Right.
for not having a
Yeah.
child
Mhm.
in sort of like
Yeah.
late teens.
Yeah. I wonder how it is for you to feel out of step because I know for me it can be quite a painful experience.
I would say there are some things for me that are painful and some things for me that feel okay. And it depends on what I'm thinking about and the context around why those things are out of step.
Mhm.
So if I'm out of step because something has delayed me, then I have a lot
Mm.
of, yeah, pain around that. Whereas if I'm out of step, for example, because I've been to university 3 times, well, I am going to be out of step because I've prioritized career and learning and education compared to people that haven't been 3 times. So then I don't regret that and that feels okay.
Yeah, okay. That's really interesting because I was only thinking about being out of step in a being behind kind of way
Mm,
or being more limited or not able to do the expected things. Whereas you could be out of step because you're learning or growing or achieving or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
life's just taken you in a different
Different.
direction.
Yeah. Mhm.
Whether that's study, whether that's a job that involves a lot of travel,
Mhm.
whether your job is quite intense, doesn't leave that much room for socializing. If you're doing, I mean, if your study involves something like medicine, I mean,
Mhm.
you've got years of intense work
Yeah.
and study, and so much of life becomes
Mm.
about that.
Yeah.
So I think it can put a lot of other things on hold. If you're going to focus on something that takes a lot of your time, it's inevitable that other things are going to be put
Yeah.
on hold or not looked at much. And then you
Yeah.
can end up feeling behind in that section of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So we've talked a bit about children, and I think university is another really big thing about feeling kind of in sync with people or not in sync with people. So when I was younger, going to university was expected for me. You know, I've kind of spoken before. I'm the clever one in my family. It was anticipated that I would go and become a doctor or a lawyer or, you know, some kind of big status job like that. And I made a conscious decision at 16 to not do that for various reasons. But I have always felt like I've missed out on that uni experience. But I'm also aware that that is a fantasy version. And I do wonder actually what would that experience have been like for me? Especially because at that age, I wasn't very confident. I think I found making friends hard. And I think that's difficult. I think if you don't make friends at university, you can have a really lonely experience.
Yeah.
So instead, I live with this fantasy idea of the group of friends that I would have met that I'd still be friends with now, and, you know, all of that.
Yeah. Well, I
But
think
yeah,
when we do fantasize about things we haven't done or maybe that we'd wished we'd done at certain points in our life, we
yeah,
are often thinking about it through the good experiences that
yeah,
we would have had rather than we actually don't know how we would have experienced that thing.
yeah, yeah. But I think it's really common, certainly among the people that I work with, that uni hasn't been the experience that they hoped for or expected, whether that's because they've had a really strong perfectionist streak or have had really intense parenting. So all of their focus has been on studying and nothing else. So there's been no room for joining clubs or making friends or having other experiences, that it's just been about head in the books and nothing else.
Mm.
Or whether it's been more social anxiety and they've just felt really alone. And I think it's such a difficult time of life as well. You know, you're trying to figure out who you are. You know, for most people, it's going to be the first time that they've been away from home. So it's the practical side of becoming an adult, but also the emotional side of becoming an adult while you're undertaking the huge educational element as well. Um, it feels like quite a common experience to be looking around at people and wondering why or how they seem to be having a great time and you're not.
So
Yeah.
that can happen in anything
Yeah.
that we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do often have this fantastical or romanticized idea of what that experience would have been like if I had had it.
Yeah.
And of
Yes.
course,
Yeah.
it being preferable to maybe what we had. But thinking about this episode, we're coming at it from that age perspective in terms of how it feels for you to be the age that you are and where you feel like you are,
Yeah.
but also the element of these so called age related milestones and then where you feel like
Mm.
you're at currently in your life and what it's like to watch other people hit milestones that maybe you haven't had and where that can be painful and whether that's due to certain experiences that you've had in your life that have meant you've not been able to do that where otherwise maybe you might have been,
Mhm.
but also where just things haven't quite happened for you. If you think about somebody, some people really want to get married, for example.
Yeah.
So I'm 37, never been married. Getting married doesn't bother me. It's not a goal that I have.
Mhm.
Would I do it? Possibly.
Mhm.
But I'm more on the fence. It's like, well, I'll do it or I'll not do it. Whereas
Mm.
if somebody was my age and for so long all they'd wanted was to find their
Yeah.
person and to get married, then
Yeah.
not being married when they see everybody around them being married is going to be a great source of pain and heartache.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be different for everybody, isn't it? And I know for myself, I can forget what I have when I'm thinking about, when I'm focused on what I haven't got. So for me at the moment, it's owning a house. So I've owned a house in the past, lost it in a divorce, and not managed to get back on the property ladder yet. And that's such a big thing. Like it can almost take over my life. But I do also have to sit back and reflect on the fact that I have 5 children and I'm very fortunate to have children. And I wouldn't swap.
No.
I wouldn't swap.
But also, the housing market has changed significantly in your lifetime
Massively.
as well.
Massively. Yeah. 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 So, well, the first big kind of boom in my life was around 2002, so I was still 16 then. So I just finished school. I moved out when I was 16. Moved out of my parents' home when I was 16. So we were renting and distinctly remember thinking like house prices are ridiculous. They're never going to stay this high. We'll wait for them to come back down. And of course they never have. And we had another massive boom in the pandemic as well. They shot up massively. Yeah, which has completely changed the possibility of getting on the housing market. And of course, trying to buy a house big enough for 5 children is not easy. But yeah, I think I was definitely given a very narrow path of what life should look like. And it absolutely was. You go to school, you get all A's in your GCSEs, you go to college or sixth form, you get all A's in your A levels, you go to university, you get a first class degree, you become a lawyer, you sacrifice your life to become a lawyer, and then I don't know, I guess sacrifice your career to become a mother and be available all of the time to your children. And which is why I didn't become a lawyer, because I knew I wanted to be around for my children. Yeah, you buy a house, you get married, you have children, you work really hard. The messages that I got were you work really hard, you retire in your 50s. So before you get to your 60s. So you buy a house, probably afford a holiday home, like that kind of,
Hmm.
it's a very narrow path. So yeah, and I definitely have an idea of, so turning 40 feels like a big thing. I think 30 felt like a big thing, but I think 40 really feels like a big thing. 40 really feels like, right, come on, you're an adult. You should really have your adult stuff together and be sorted and settled and stable. And I feel
Just out
like,
of curiosity, how do you feel about 50 compared to 40?
well, because I was getting so in my head about turning 40 and not having bought a house, I had a moment of realization the other day that I feel like I'm about 5 years behind where I should be. And that if the pandemic hadn't have happened and a couple of other things that happened during pandemic times, that I would probably be on track. So I've shifted my goal to 45 and I'm like, well, I'll achieve it by the time I'm 45 then. 50, 50 feels a bit scary for me, but also, again, I just think the messaging about what it means to be certain ages is shifting.
Hmm.
And I think it feels like there's an important reality here, that we can say like, oh, 30 is the new 20 and 40 is the new 30 and 50 is the new 40. And I think there is a reality to that in some ways. if you watch like retro TV and look at the parents in some of those things, like they look way older, like just their style, like the fashion or whatever, kind
Yeah.
of ages people. So I think there is a youthfulness about women in their 50s that there wasn't in the past. I'm just remembering when I was a kid and I was just so impressed that my grandma was still playing tennis and she was 55. Like it was the craziest thing ever. Whereas now that's just normal, isn't it? So yeah, I kind of, I am aware of, and I've started following like Instagram accounts of all like women in their 40s and 50s, and there's a lot more conversation now about menopause and things like that. But about, I guess living well in midlife, that you're not just, it's not just past it and downhill to the care home. It's a very different feel now. But also there is still part of me that's like, oh my gosh, 50, and then like you're nearly dead, aren't you?
Yes. Just listening to you talk about it, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be midlife. I don't want to be midlife. And it's like, what is that about? Why do we feel this way? And why is so much of the narrative around this as well? Like even in the media, I mean, I'm thinking about the Friends episode, like the one where they all turned 30.
Yeah.
Cherry's like, why, God, why are you doing this to us? But it feels a little bit like that. But it's so hard to say, but why? And I think we do value youthfulness, of course. And it makes sense that you would want to be in a younger, more agile, energized body. But yeah, it's so hard to really put your finger on why it's become such an issue to get older. And there's such an emotional response to it. I mean, that's ultimately what I was having there. Like it's hard to put into words, but talking about being midlife, being
Yeah.
in your 40s, approaching 50, there's just such a strong, like, recoiling sensation in my body that's just like,
Yeah.
no. But I think you're right. This is one of the things that's often confused me because I remember when I was a child, people in their 30s, like they seemed old.
Mm.
And so I have a sister who's 15 and I say to her, like, when you look at me, do I seem old? And I was like, be truthful. I need the truth here. Because I don't feel in my 30s like I am how 30-year-olds look to me when I was a child, but then that must just be perspective. Kids must look at you the same way you looked at them. But then I also, as you said, don't think that that's true because I think 30 is younger than it was
Yeah.
when we were younger because you're right. I am really silly and really playful. I don't really remember being around adults that adulted how I adult. I don't know if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
But sometimes I still feel silly and childlike and a bit immature. And I always thought of adults as being so serious
Mm.
and old. And I don't
Mm.
feel that way.
What did your sister say out of interest?
Well, she said, no, you're not.
No.
I don't see you being old at all. I says, oh, what do you see as like, oh, they're old? And
Yeah.
I think she said 50-ish
Yeah.
from what she said, which still made me think that's not that far away. But I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things that I think about is that, I think aging has shifted. And actually, I think this is, and I'm sure I've read about it, it is down to the cost of being able to buy a house. So if you would have been able to buy a house when you were early 20s in the past, when you could get a house on one person's salary,
I love
you've
the
then got,
resentment in your tone as you said that. Then, like when you could get a house on
yeah,
one
all right
person's
for
salary.
them.
Yeah, that you bought for 20,000 and is now worth 1 million.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So if you're able to buy a house in your 20s, that then sets you up, doesn't it, for marriage, for children, for
Mm,
responsibility, for getting a job, and you have to keep your job because of you've got your mortgage to pay. It kind of sets you on a path. Whereas now, I think it's really common for young adults to not move out until they're 25 or older. I feel like that would have been. I've got a bit of a distorted picture because, like I said, I moved out when I was 16. But 25, still living at home to 25, there's part of me that's like, that feels really old. Not for my children, my adult children, if you're listening.
mm.
I like you living with me. Yeah, so I think adulthood has shifted, kind of same as like we said for having children. Everything's sort of shifted along. I think the average age of buying your first home is actually really late now. I saw a
Yeah.
figure the other day and I feel like I'm making it up, but I'm sure it's like mid 30s.
Oh, yeah, I think it is. I'm going to Google it actually. 33 years old, but it does
Right.
vary significantly by region and is higher in areas with more expensive property, like
Yeah.
south. So, yeah, it can differ by several years. But yeah, the fact that the average age, and that's now, is 33
Yeah.
for your children, for
Yeah.
example, or for the nieces,
Yeah.
nephews, in my life, unless something crazy changes, that
Yeah.
is going to be even higher. I mean, I lived at home till I was 24,
Hmm.
24, 25. And even then, the reason I was able to buy a home was largely because of my partner at the time, who was a bit older than me and contributed most of the deposit.
Yeah.
So even at that time, if that hadn't have happened, it would have been even longer.
Yeah. So when you were saying about why do we have this big resistance to getting to certain milestones? I think again, it comes back to capitalism and the patriarchy. I think there's also an existential piece in there because it
Mm.
does remind you that you don't have forever. And I think 40 feels like a big one because it does feel like I'm probably about halfway through my life. And what am I doing with my life? And is this what I want to be doing with my life? And if it's not, how do I change it to make it, different? But yeah, in terms of capitalism, again, we're constantly pumped with youth, whether that's creams, Botox, or facelifts, or, we're constantly told that just images of young, fresh faced people all the time.
Yeah. Men
Um,
trading us in for younger models.
exactly. Yeah. And, and the patriarchy and women's worth as childbearers. And, so once you're into the menopause, that, what use are you to society? um, whereas I just feel like the conversation is shifting around that. I think there is more empowerment of older women and the recognition of the wisdom of older
Yeah.
women. But also, you said something about recognizing that we're as old as we are. And it always surprises me. So when I do see photos of, if I bump into somebody that I used to go to school with that's older, not so much with women, although I think in 40s we are kind of starting, that crinkling around your eyes.
Mhm.
So you get wrinkles. Certainly, when you're younger than I thought I was going to get wrinkles, but they kind of wrinkle as you move your face and then they can go away. Whereas I'm starting to get the wrinkles that are there no matter what. But particularly for men and receding hairlines. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
yeah, we're getting old, aren't we? And it freaks me out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to spend too much time here because we'll end up going back into the
Yeah.
existential episode again. But from that zoomed out perspective, it's crazy that the way this is things set up. And I know I always say this, and it's not like I'm saying I know what the answer is in terms of how to set things up. But with you saying, oh, okay, I'm basically halfway through my life now, if you're lucky, if
Yeah.
is that the time of our lives when we're likely to have the healthiest bodies with the most energy is the time when it's all taken up by work
Yeah.
and working so hard so you can have a good pension so that then you can have your life
Yeah.
when you're ailed, when you're less capable, when
Yeah.
you have then less energy, where you are more likely to get health conditions and not have as good quality of life
Mm.
versus if you could do it almost the other way around or something.
Yeah.
I just think your youthful years are short and
Yeah.
precious, and they're
Mhm.
just taken up by all this stuff that you've got to do. So
Yeah.
that then at the end, when
Hmm.
your quality of life is poorer, like, oh, now you can do all of these things. Well, great. Now I ache when I get up out of bed, and it's hard enough
Yeah.
just to get dressed, let alone go off traveling around the world.
Yeah.
Gonna climb Mount Kilimanjaro when I'm 72. Yeah, it's just unlikely to
Mm.
happen. And it just, yeah, it brings me back to it's just not fair that it's that way round, that these things
Yeah.
have to influence the way in which I can live my life and what I do with my life.
Yeah. 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 And when you say about not fair, that makes me think about what it's like to go what it's like to go through life if you've experienced trauma or if you're neurodivergent, because I think that's going to have an impact on your life. So I'm thinking, certainly for me, part of the reason why I don't feel 40 is because, I think about it developmentally. So the things that I was supposed to be doing when I was 16, I wasn't doing them because I was having to house myself. I was having to work and also try and study because I'd moved out of home. I'd needed to move out of home. So I had bills to pay. So I didn't have that freedom. And then, as I've moved through my 20s, I was in really unhealthy relationships and abusive relationships. So I've had to spend time and money. I don't want to add up how much money I've spent on therapy dealing with the way that other people have treated me over the years. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot. But yeah, so I've had to spend time and money healing from
Yeah.
abuse and trauma that other people haven't had to do. And I think this is another thing that's coming up in sort of social media conversations is the idea of emotional regulation and relationship skills as a form of generational wealth.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That having financially healthy parents gives you a boost. They can give you a deposit or whatever. But I think that's also true of emotional regulation. So if you've got emotionally healthy parents, you're going to find it easier to have friendships. You're going to find it easier to have relationships with people. You're going to find it easier to succeed in life, to not get in your own way and all these kinds of things. So I think that's a really big factor to take into account, that we're not all on, a level playing field
Yeah.
at all. I know that, we've all got the same 24 hours in the day comes on every now and again. And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
well,
I hate that.
we might have the same 24 hours in the day, but we don't have the same commitments and we don't have the same resources. And that's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And so as I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about, so I've read recently about, I don't know if it's specific to ADHD or general for people that are neurodivergent, but I think it's ADHD, about being 30%, or it takes 30% longer to develop executive function skills. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah. It does sound familiar. Yeah.
That's going to have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
If you struggle with time management, organization, all of those things, that's going to impact how much progress you can make in your life and how old you feel. You know,
Definitely.
being messy makes me feel like a child.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are so many things that you might struggle to do as an adult that then can make you feel childlike or like you don't know how to adult. I mean, that's something that I
Yeah.
experience a lot for different reasons. But when we're thinking about the so called race of life and the things to have achieved at certain points in life, you're so right. And it's important to take account of the fact that we don't all have the same starting point.
Yeah.
Some of us can start way behind or way forward before we've even learnt to talk.
Yeah.
And yet we will be comparing ourselves with people and we don't know what start they had in life. And it's so important, as you said, to recognize, yeah, financial is a big one. The emotional capabilities of your parents is another one. The access that you had to education and learning, the
Mm-hmm.
access that you had to social environment from an early age.
Yeah.
When we think about child development and all of the things that you need as a child from in utero, which is where it starts,
Yeah.
it goes that far back. So before you're even born, there can have been various factors in your life that already mean you're starting off on a back foot.
Yeah.
When we compare, there's no limit. We will compare against anybody. And yeah, I hate that whole you've got the same 24 hours in your day as Beyonce. Like, well, great. That doesn't mean that I can be Beyonce, does it?
Sure. Yeah. 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 And, so just to stay with that example, like, I don't know what her parents' financial situation was, but yeah, I don't know what the financial situation was, but Beyonce had people that believed in her. And I think that is such a massive thing. If you grow up with someone that believes in you, that says you can achieve this, you can do this, you're capable of this, versus if you grow up and no one really achieves, or it's like, oh, it's all right for other people, but in our family we just get on, we just get our heads down and get on. Yeah, that's massively different. I think having someone who believes in you is huge. I think even because I think you often find, or, there are big business people that didn't come from money.
Yeah.
But I think often if you listen to their story, they've had somebody who believes in them, whether that's a parent or another relative or a family friend or a teacher or someone that that makes them believe that they are capable. That's enormous.
Yeah. And that is where, I mean, so many people that you and I work with, but also in yours and mine own stories, when you were reflecting on the traumatic experiences that you've had and how that
Mm.
has influenced, well, how that has influenced your life, where your focus ultimately then shifted to survival rather than living and achieving and what goals that you can achieve. And I'd say that's the difference for me, where I feel okay with feeling behind because I chose to go to university 3 times, and that inevitably puts my focus on that
Yeah.
versus traumatic experiences. So when I was 21 and I went through a big traumatic experience, which tipped my world upside down and left me in the pits of deep depression, it took me years to claw my way back out of that place.
Mm.
And for so long, I struggled so much with the fact that it meant that I missed out on my early 20s. So, in the early 20s, when people are typically finding themselves, going out all the time,
Yeah.
making lots of friends, traveling, having less responsibilities, you're maybe still at home, you're earning money. I mean, sometimes in your early 20s, you have more disposable income, even though you're earning less because it's going on less things.
Mm.
So you can do more and buy more nice clothes and just have that period of doing those kinds of things. And all of that was taken away from me.
Yeah.
So it felt like I missed out on a key developmental period. And again,
Mm.
potentially I'm romanticizing what my early 20s may have been. They may not have looked like that.
Yeah.
But when a huge chunk of time is taken away from you for whatever reason, whether that is trauma, or whether that is a serious illness, a significant bereavement in your family, something that then consumes your waking days, it is then going to leave you where you miss out on a key period of your life.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be behind
Yeah.
because of that. And they're the parts that are painful to me because that wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
And whilst most people have had challenges in their life that have detracted them from their path, not
Hmm.
everybody has had things happen in their life that takes huge chunks of time
Yes.
away from their life.
Yeah.
And it's, are you factoring that into the equation when you're thinking about where you are?
Yeah.
Because it's like when you said you shifted your goal to be 45 because of how much the pandemic impacted things.
Yeah.
Well, if I say trauma took away 5 years of my life, well,
Yeah.
you need to take 5 years off where you are then. There are
Yeah.
so many things where you're measuring yourself against the age that you're at rather than, but what years have you actually had
Yeah.
where you were able to work towards this
Yeah.
versus when you were basically surviving in a hole, just trying to figure out how to keep going.
Yeah. So I guess acknowledging all of those things really then leaves you with the grief of the time that was lost. And that can be so painful. Like it's painful to have to acknowledge the things that have happened to us and how that's impacted our sense of self and our perception of the, others and the world around us. That there's that active healing. And then what I'm realizing again as I move through another trauma, as I move through the trauma of becoming estranged, is like I've reached a point where I am coming to some acceptance for that I've moved past blaming myself for how things have worked out. But now what I'm confronted with is the grief, is not just the grief of losing the relationship with my mum, but also the grief of losing the life that I thought I'd had if our relationship was different.
Hmm. Yeah.
So like, so for your example, yeah, the grief of your early 20s and that, yeah, the fantasy of how it could have been, or, even if it's not the rose tinted version of however we're viewing what we've missed out on, there's losses that we've had to spend time and often money recovering, and we have missed out on things. And that's
Yeah.
hard, and you can't ever get that back. And it is the grief process.
It is difficult and it is something you can never get back. Although there was one period of time, and I feel glad that I did this. So when I was 28, 29, I'd separated from my partner with whom I had the first house with, and I had to move back in with my mum for a year. And so I decided that my 29th year and my final year of my 20s, I was going to relive my early 20s.
Amazing.
Yeah. So in my 29th year, so my cousins are quite a lot younger than me. So they were all still in there going to the pub and going into town and things like that. I joined them. So I went out loads that year. It was basically a bunch of younger men and then just me. We went to Dublin for 24 hours, so we didn't even get a hotel.
Wow.
But also, I spent that year going on loads of dates with all sorts of different types of people. I've not really had an opportunity to discover what do I really like in another person. And maybe I find other things attractive that I don't know yet that I would find attractive. Just meet people and rediscover what it is that you like and what it is that you don't like. So I went on loads of dates that year. There was one time I went on like 3 dates in 1 week. So it was quite nice. Don't get me wrong, it was a wild year and I absolutely burnt out. And being totally transparent, I ended up having to have a year out of uni because I think I overdid it and totally crashed on the other end.
Mm.
However, there was something quite freeing and nice about choosing to reclaim some of that lost time.
Mm.
And so, whilst we can never get it back, and don't get me wrong, it is certainly not the same, it felt quite empowering, I guess,
Mm.
to feel like, no, I'm taking some of that back for myself.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. That just sounds so exciting and fun. And yeah, like you say, empowering to do that. And yeah, I'm kind of wondering about how I might apply that to my own life. And I don't think it translates quite as much. I think, well, because I got a bit of an early 20s experience because when my first husband and I separated, we had the children 50-50. So for half the week I got to be a young adult. Not really, not in the same way as you do when you haven't got children at all. I feel like I've got something really important to say, but I feel like it's too fresh and I don't really know how to articulate it. But what I was talking about with my therapist yesterday, or this kind of challenge that she set for me, is to think about how I give birth to myself,
Okay.
like a new version of myself, another round of who am I. So for me, for my situation being estranged from my mum, it's who am I if I'm not constrained by that relationship and having to live up to those expectations, unspoken, unconscious expectations, whether they were put on me by her or by myself. There's something about what does being 40 mean to me in this life now.
Yeah.
But I think for me there is that. I think I look at my mum and who she was when she turned 40. So my mum, she'd bought a house and she had 2 children. She was divorced, but she had 2 children. She was very glamorous. But yeah, I think I've just got this image of, maybe it's quite well, no, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I think it's quite a 90s image of what 40-year-olds should be.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
So my expectations are still based in ideas that I formed when I was in my teens.
Mm.
And actually the world has changed and my life has changed so much.
Yeah, that's such a good point because we've not got anything now to replace that with because we are it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the only image we can hold is what we know 40 is, which is
Yeah.
actually from, well, 4 decades ago in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere to reframe that for ourselves because we are it. We are this generation of
Yeah.
40.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes me think about, so I get these kind of jolts so to me, a primary school teacher should be about 20 years older than I am. They're not.
No.
Some of my children's teachers are, I don't know, in this school, but in the other, in other schools are younger than me. Certainly secondary school teachers are younger than me. That
Mhm.
feels wild. Like, how is a secondary
Yes.
school teacher younger than me? And it's the same with police officers, MPs. Like,
Yeah.
those jobs are for adults.
Yeah. What are you doing in that job?
Yeah. Yeah. And could get that same job being a therapist. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, how am I anybody's therapist? And then but I guess that is discounting what I have achieved. So I think there's something important about coming back to what have you achieved?
Yeah.
And I suppose, and so just kind of going back briefly about trauma is if you have been through something traumatic, it's not recovering from a traumatic event is not something that you would have wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And it's still an achievement. I
Yeah.
have spent a long time in therapy working through some really difficult things, and they are achievements. They're not things I can stick on my Instagram story. They're
Yeah.
not things I'm going to shout about with lots of other people, but they are really significant. They took hard work, and I have turned my life around because of the hard work that I have put in.
Yeah. I almost
Mm.
want to clap.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true because how many things have we worked so hard to achieve that are things that other people just have no clue about or
Yeah.
could never comprehend or even realize that that's something that you've done
Yeah.
or have had to go through. Yeah, that could be just such a great number of different things that yeah, you're not going to post about or shout about, and that's then tricky if that might be one of the most significant achievements of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
You don't walk across a stage and get a certificate, for healing from your childhood trauma, for example.
You should. I
Or
want a brownie badge. I want a brownie
yeah.
badge on a sash that's like the cycle breaker badge.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to create some. We could
Yeah.
sell them. We could
Yeah,
make
we
some and sell
could.
them. Oh my God, new business idea. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, I mean, that's another thing that certainly has delayed my development, just constant new ideas all the time and doing with them for a bit before going on to the next one.
Hmm.
But yeah, people have no idea about the path that you have trodden and how many things have veered you away from that path that may not have been in your control. Even things that might have been in your control. We're also humans and stuff happens. But it is then difficult when you're comparing that your path to somebody else's path who may have been quite straight with lots of helping hands along the way to keep and stay on the path.
Yeah.
And it is still hard, and there is still the grief about not being where you envisioned yourself being
Hmm.
right now.
Yeah.
And especially when you're comparing that with others. I know a big one for me is travel. I love travel. So the fact that I haven't yet had children, and I'm very much on the fence about children. But in my head, I thought, well, if I do end up having them late, it will be fine because I'll have done all of my traveling. So sometimes people talk about the great thing about having children in later life is that you can have built this great career and have had all of these experiences and you do your traveling before you have the children. Versus my friends who have had children at a very young age say, oh, well, I'm nearly at the age where now I can do all of that other stuff. And unfortunately, just because of life and how things have worked for me, it's meant that I've ended up at this older age, but having not done all the things I thought I would have done
Yeah.
if I'd have had children. And so now, if I choose to have children, I'm a bit like, but then when do I do all of that other stuff that I've still
Yeah.
not done yet?
Yeah.
But if I don't have children on that basis, there's still nothing to say that I'll do that anyway, because you never know what's around the corner. And annoyingly, travel since COVID is so expensive, even for the most basic of holidays that never used to be. So
Hmm.
travel's not even as doable or as accessible as it was before. I mean,
Yeah.
gosh, when I look at prices now and how you could easily get a cheap week away for like £500 for somewhere that's pretty decent, it's like insane.
Yeah.
So you don't even know if that's possible anymore. So
Yeah.
I am now at the stage where, yeah, it's hard for me to decide. I mean, there's certain challenges anyway that I won't get into on that front, but it's difficult for me to then decide when I am ambivalent about it. Ooh, because that's one thing we've not spoken about. And I appreciate with the episode probably should start to come to a close, but just the whole biological clock thing,
Yeah. Hmm.
because when you are approaching 40, you're so aware of you have a time limit of when you can have children.
Hmm.
And if you're somebody that really knows, like, oh, I really want children,
Yeah.
then don't get me wrong, it's not ideal, but there are still things somebody might do to make that happen. If they're approaching 40, if they don't have a partner, if they have support,
Yeah.
they may well be able to still do that for themselves. Oh, but I find it so hard when you're ambivalent because I don't know
Mm.
how you're supposed to choose when you don't know and you can see pros and cons on both sides. And
Mm.
yet you're aware that you have to make a decision
Yeah.
because of that ticking clock. And I guess just on those milestones, I think having kids is the only biological one. But I remember being at school and setting like pacts with people about if neither of us are married by the time we're 40, we'll marry each other, which is something that again you used to see in TV shows. But again, almost like if you're not married by 40, like you best get married to somebody where you're making a pact.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I'm just trying to think back to, I think marriage is something that's massively changed throughout my lifetime. I'm thinking that I can only think of one friend's parents who weren't married. I think they have now married. But yeah, I think it was quite unusual to not be married, whereas now it's just not that big of a deal. A
Mm.
bit like divorce. I think there was still shame about divorce. And I think there still is for some people, but it's not in the same way that it was even when I was a child.
No.
Yeah, that things are just shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we shift from I'm behind to I'm on a different timeline? I feel like we've touched on it, but I'm like, I don't even know. And I don't even think I've achieved that yet. I do just feel behind. So, for you, with all of this in mind, how do you support yourself to feel enough, even if things are still a work in progress or you haven't figured things out?
Oh, I feel like that is the question.
Mm,
I mean, I don't know how the listeners will be feeling at this point, but I'm very much aware that I'm sat with a heaviness. And
mm,
I think just talking through the episode and the acknowledgement that, yeah, so much of what we've spoken about, and even when we've spoken about it in a light-hearted way, but it is actually quite heavy and difficult. You get one life, and when you have big feelings about how it's gone or how it's going, and the grief that can be involved in that. Yeah, it is hard. So I kind of want to acknowledge and not just brush over the emotional response that I'm having in case others are having it too. But how is that then? Yeah, how can it be enough knowing that I am where I am? I don't know. Maybe it's just that I am where I am.
right.
I can be sad about it. I can cry about it. I can panic about it. I can be really anxious and stressed about it. But this is the path that I've ended up on. And it's where I am now. And perhaps the only thing that really matters is okay, what now?
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be pressure to now catch up or to be where I need to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes as well, I think we're holding on to goals that we had when we were younger, that if we really stopped and checked in with ourselves, we might not feel as that important now, or we might not value
Yeah.
in the same way that we did. And they might be small things or they might be big things. When I was younger, I was quite materialistic and I really valued like high designer pieces. And if you look at some of my bucket list things that I wrote down from when I was a teenager, it's like own Louis Vuitton suitcases and things like that. Whereas now, I'd never spend my money on that. So I'm not behind and I've not achieved what I've not wanted to. My values have shifted greatly from when I was young. When I was younger, I did want to be married by a certain age and I wanted to have specifically 3 children of my own and adopt 2 children. I mean, I know you have 5, but I now could not conceive of having 5 children running about my house. I love the idea of big families so much, and I know it would put me in an early grave. um,
Yeah.
but perhaps it's also checking in with yourself. Are you holding on to ideals and hopes that you had for yourself that actually aren't that important to you anymore or don't really matter?
Mm,
And don't make too much difference to your life overall. You know, where you think you need a thing, but you don't really need a thing.
yeah. 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 I think for me, listening to you say that, I think for me, it's about having the space to feel how I feel about it. And that might take a long time. But, the last couple of years, I've been through a really long process of feeling angry. And I've tried to rationalize my way out of the anger. And I've even tried to feel my way out of the anger, but in a like, come on, anger, hurry up, let's be done with this and move on to the next thing. And I think what I'm realizing now, as I feel like I'm actually finally coming out of it, is that there was nothing I could have done to have speeded it up. I've been in therapy throughout. I've supported myself in various ways. Sometimes it takes years to be done with the emotions of something happening that you didn't want to happen. And there is a lot of grief with that. I feel like the last couple of years of my life feel like missed opportunities in so many ways, but I wasn't ready. I've had to slow right down and take my time. And yeah, so that there has to be some acceptance of that, because fighting with reality gets me nowhere. But it also feels important to acknowledge that, if you've been through something and you're a year later and you're like, why am I still feeling this way? Sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes that's just how it is. It's worth, I think therapy is worth it to make sure that you're not just stuck in a loop, that you're not, that there isn't something going on that some support might help you step out of. And therapy's been so important for me to be able to step out of loops that I was getting caught in. But also I can see I've been through something massive.
Yeah.
And yeah, the idea that I could logic my way through it quicker is just not realistic.
Yeah. No, I like that. I feel like in the way in which we've both answered that question, I think there's a lot there to take forward, and there'll be some things that we're doing or that we've tried that might be helpful for other people. And also just acknowledging there are so many things that, we don't have the answers for, and so much is just living it and just doing it and making of life what we can with where we are now and the resources that we have available to us, whatever that looks like. And even if things look different than we thought, different doesn't always have to mean worse.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think different is worse or not as good as, but making the best of where we find ourselves, even if it's not where we thought we would end up, whilst also acknowledging the difficult emotions that come along with that as well.
Yeah. 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 It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether you're freshly adulting, turning 40 like me in 3 days, or realizing things at 55 that you wish you'd known decades ago,
Happy early birthday, by the way.
thanks. But yeah, wherever you are, if you're feeling too young to be this old, here's what I want you to know.
You're not behind. You're not failing. You're doing work most people will never have the courage to do.
The grief is real and you're allowed to feel it, but you're also allowed to start living now, not once you're fixed, because you're not broken.
You're exactly where you need to be.
Next time, we're talking about too online to be okay, when your screen time is silently destroying your mental health, social media spirals, comparison culture, and why you can't seem to put the damn phone down, even though it makes you feel terrible.
But for now, we'll leave you with this. What would happen if you stopped chasing lost time and started trusting that you're allowed to begin again at any age?
That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.